Hello everyone, Old Guy Gaming here, and tonight we're going to be talking about where to start in your Warhammer 40K hobby with hobby tools. So this is going to be hopefully a three-part series kind of covering over the basic tools that you need to begin to put your models together in the Warhammer 40K hobby. Now, I do mention 40K exclusively because that's the particular miniatures game that I play, but a lot of this can be used for virtually any miniatures game that you're getting into. Age of Sigmar, Star Wars Legions, any of the World War II ones from like Flames of War, things like that. A lot of the things are going to be fairly universal throughout any miniatures hobby, so feel free to take a lot of these pieces of advices that I'm going to be giving you with that in mind. You can pretty much use it for anything. I am also going to kind of point out that there are some pieces of hobby tools that I consider to be essentials and some that are nice to haves, and I'll make sure to point out along the way which ones that I feel are essential needs and the others that I will point out that are would be nice to have but you don't necessarily require them, especially whenever you're starting out in the hobby. So the first thing I want to talk about is Workspace, a place to actually put your models together. Now, I'm going to switch over to this real quick. I'm often jealous when I watch some of my favorite YouTubers on some of my favorite content creators on YouTube that have these fantastic, amazing setups. Like, they clearly have a room that is set aside and dedicated specifically to their hobby, to putting their models and miniatures together. That is a safe, quiet space that the kids aren't going to get into, the dogs aren't going to get into, and everything's going to stay exactly where you left it whenever you start off with. I, however, do not have this. I am a father of four with pets and cats and folks that like to knock stuff off a table, so this is not my workspace. What my workspace is more a little bit portable. So it's it's basically something that I set up that I can be able to sit down on the couch, put Netflix on, put something on TV that I can basically ignore, and sit down and actually paint and do my modeling on there. So I'll give you a shot of what my workspace looks like. This is more my speed. I have a little folding table that I picked up at a garage sale. I think I paid $5 for it. It's about 2.5 feet long by about 1.5 feet wide, which is just perfect to be able to sit down in front of the couch. Sit down, it's right at the perfect height that I'm looking for. Sit on the couch, put all the stuff down. It's got more than enough room for me to be able to maneuver, set paints down, wet palettes, things like that. We'll get into all of those things a little bit later. So, and the second part to that, of course, is you need something to keep all of your hobby tools in, some place to store them. So because I have everything on the run, I try to have everything in a very portable way, and this is something I picked up at Walmart for like $10. This is it. This is the actual hobby case itself. It's an actual fishing tackle box, but here, I'll flip back over to show you some pictures. This is actually pretty darn amazing. So this is where I keep all of my hobby tools. I keep my paints, I keep my paintbrushes, glues, tools, everything kind of goes into here. All of the compartments are fantastic. So I use the top one for my brushes and a handful of my tools and files. But as you can tell, this actually accordions out to a whole bunch more storage space. So I keep extra bits and my glues and clippers, and the bottom section's tall enough that it's big enough that it can keep like even the tall washes from Games Workshop, which are really taller pots, can all get stored in there all at the same time. Everything that I need is stored right in this little box. So since I keep everything portable, I have my little folding table that kind of sits behind the couch when no one ever sees it. I can pull that out, pull this out, and boom, I am instantly ready to start my hobbying. So again, none of the two things that I just gave you are considered to be required by any stretch of the imagination. If you do have the option of having your own room that you can sit down and and keep everything cool and quiet, and no one's going in there, nothing's getting disturbed, models aren't getting knocked over while they're drying overnight or something like that. If you have that option, by all means, take that option. That's what you should do. But for others who are looking for something a little bit more portable, this is what I recommend. A tackle box, I think I paid $10 at Walmart in US in 2020. Based on how long this video is going to be out on the internet, in 2020, I think I paid $10 for this plastic thing, and it served my needs for years. All right, so let's move on to the basic tools that you're going to need, because in case you don't know, your models do not come pre-assembled. They do not come together all in one piece like this whenever you purchase them from Games Workshop or most of the games companies that you're dealing with. They'll come on something like this. This one's used. I've already cut all most of the bits off to build some models, but this is called a sprue. I've also heard it called a tree or frame. And what you'll see is all the bits and pieces to put your models together are all going to be on one big piece of plastic that need to be removed and assembled. Now, we'll go ahead and take a peek here, which means the very first thing you're going to need, and I'm actually going to start pulling tools out of the toolbox here, is you're going to need a pair of clippers to get those off correctly. I recommend the flat-handed or the flat-backed pair of clippers just like this, with a nice flat back with a well on the inside, to be able to clip pieces off. And I'm going to give you here a good, nice close-up. That's my set right there. So basically, you're going to be using those tools to clip the bits off of the sprue to be able to get them all together. As you can tell in the background of this photo, there are actual instructions that come with your models on how to assemble them, and they tell you what pieces to go and collect. They're usually numbered. It's a little difficult to show on camera, which is why I picked this picture to show up, but there are numbers on each of these trees or each of these sprues to tell you which number goes where. So when the instructions tell you to look for part 41 or part 46, you can know to go find them. Now keep in mind, they don't tend to do that in numerical order. Like, it doesn't go from 1 to 60 from the top to bottom. They're usually all over the place. So there's a fun little game of the hunt and peck of trying to find the pieces on the sprue. But once you find them, you're going to need a pair of flat clippers. Usually I attempt to keep the flat piece against the sprue, the piece you're trying to cut out, and leave that well on the outside and clip from there. What you're also going to find is this isn't an exact science, and clipping all the pieces off doesn't always go according to plan. So sometimes you end up with pieces that have a little bit of extra plastic, or even worse, in some cases, depending on how well the model was made, you'll have mold lines, which is where the next tool comes in, and that is going to be your X-Acto knife. You don't need necessarily a name brand X-Acto knives. I've got several, but basically you need a very sharp blade knife, hobby knife, to be able to cut away some of the bits and plastic that you do not want. The way that this process works, how they make these, is basically two molds, one on top of each other, and then they basically shoot the molten plastic into the mold. So that's occasionally what you'll find, where the two molds meet, a little bit of excess plastic sometimes comes out. That is called flashing. And you'll get lines directly on where the two molds meet. Those are called mold lines. It's usually recommended, if you want to have your models look cool and clean, to shave those mold lines off. It's basically just like, shaving your face or shaving your legs. You basically take the sharp edge of the blade across the surface you want to do and just shave that all down so that those mold lines don't show up. There are certain paint techniques, specifically like dry brushing, for example, that will expose the fact that there are mold lines there, and it just kind of makes the model look kind of unwell prepared. It doesn't look the best that you can possibly make it in just a couple of seconds. It is a little labor intensive to go across and get all the mold lines off, but a good sharp hobby knife is an absolute must, in my opinion. So now that you've clipped your sprues, you've taken them pieces off, you've cleaned all the mold lines, how do you put them together? Well, that's where glue comes in. Now, there's 3 types of glue that I highly recommend, genuinely feel that you need, to be perfectly honest with you on all these. And that is, here, we'll go back to the main screen. And that's going to be one of 2 different types of glue. This is going to be your classic super glue, or Gorilla Glue, whichever ones you kind of use. And then your good old-fashioned plastic glue. These 2 glues have 2 different purposes. Super glues are usually used, in my opinion. There are certain people that prefer to glue all of their models with super glue. The problem that I have with super glue, for the most part, is that the bond isn't super strong. And if you happen to drop a model, for example, it's possible that a bit breaks off and then you lose it under a table and you never find it again, kind of thing. These plastic glues, I prefer the testers because it's cheap and available pretty much anywhere. Walmart carries this. Any hobby store will carry this. Train shops carry this, oddly enough. That's where I get mine, to be honest. With the plastic glue basically forms a chemical bond between the two that is basically permanent. I've often heard it sort of melts the plastic together. It takes plastic from one side, plastic together, and kind of melts it together. If you glue with plastic glue, you might as well consider that permanent. That is one of the upsides to super glue. Like, for example, the Carnifex that I have here, I have his arms super glued in so that if I were to ever want to, this is before I knew anything about magnetizing, if I ever wanted to, I could just hang onto it and take a real good grip and snap it off and put a new arm on. So there is some benefits to doing it with super glue, but a lot of my models I do specifically, like they're set the way they are unless I'm magnetizing them, and that's where the plastic glue comes in. The third glue you're going to require, and I didn't bring one down here to show you because I don't think that I need to, is your good old standard PVA glue. PVA glue, everyone knows it. It's the glue you used to use at school. It's Elmer's white glue, or the equivalent of white glue. That is usually used for basing materials, which is, if you take a look here, I'll take a look here. The miniature that we're showing here, the model here, that black bottom is the base that the model sits on. And if you really want to do a good job with your models, you really want to put them in some type of terrain. Think of a miniature from a game like this as a miniature diorama. And you want to add a little bit more character and flair to the model itself. And so he's going to be walking through somewhere. He's going to be shooting his gun somewhere. He's standing somewhere. So instead of having a dull black base, you're going to want to put like a little bit of sand or substrate. We'll get to that in a second. And you're going to want to use PVA glue to glue that down. A little bit of water mixed in with it. Just kind of put it in a cup. Mix it about a 1-to-1 ratio. Dip it in some sand. So PVA glue is going to be the other third glue you're going to require for putting those together. So next. This one's going to be completely optional. You are not required to have one of these, but this is called a pin vise. Let me see if I can grab mine. There we go. A pin vise is basically a drill bit on a very easy to spin handle. And the drill bit is used for one of two things. It's mostly for pinning. And what pinning is basically whenever you're taking a metal model and you want to be able to, you have these really hard points that you're trying to get two pieces of a model that are very delicate and need to hold a tight bond. You can actually drill a hole in one side of the model and the other side of the model, put a little wire in there. I usually use paper clip, put some super glue in there, and that'll help strengthen the bond. That's where this comes in, is drilling those holes for the paper clip that you're going to be using, or whatever material you decide to make your pin for that. The other one, if you don't want to get called out at the game store, is drilling out the barrels of your gun. Especially, again, I don't know if goes into any other games, but this is definitely a thing that people pick out on the table for 40K, is if your gun barrels are not drilled out. Why Games Workshop models them without gun barrels, I don't know. You think it would be super easy to put a hole in there. Maybe it's not as easy as I think it is to be able to put a hole in those. But usually gun barrels, like in this case, I think we're looking at a Melt-A-Gun or a Melter rifle from one of my Primaris Marines from the Indominus box set. There's obviously no gun barrel there. So it looks kind of weird when you're trying to get yourself immersed into the world of 40K or whatever game that you're playing in. Your gun barrels, there's no barrel, there's no hole, there's no place for the bullets to come out of. So that's where a pin vise definitely comes into play. I know people can use a hobby knife to do that. I've seen other people try doing that. For me, that just seems a little dangerous because it's a very sharp blade, and if you make a mistake with a pin vise, you're just going to hit your finger. You make a mistake with a hobby knife, you're going to cause some blood, and that's just not a good idea. So this is the before the barrel is drilled out. Let's go to the after of what it looks like after. This is what a drilled out barrel is supposed to look like. I have a tendency to do this on all of my models. Again, this is not a requirement. You don't feel that you need to get one of these, but I think at some point in time this is going to be a good pickup. You can find those on Amazon, any hobby shop, things like that. So now you've got the models are cut from the sprues, you've shaved the mold lines down, you've drilled out your barrels, and you've glued them to your base. What else do you need? Well, that's where that PVA glue comes in, and that is where the basing comes in. That's going to be the second step. You need yourself some sort of basing material. Now, this can be a wide variety of materials I've heard people use for basing. I've heard of the super glue baking soda or baking, I don't know which one it is. I've never used it before. Mix that you can just use to kind of paint it on. I know some people just go to their driveway and get rocks. That's pretty much what I did here. It was at the end of my driveway, I found a whole bunch of like sandy, rocky materials, and I grabbed some of that. And then some people just use a fine sand. Others, there are like crackling paints you can use, but you need something that you're going to be painting on the bases for your models. The material that I have here on the far right is, it's going to sound strange, this is litter designed for reptiles. I got this at the pet store. It is actually crushed walnut shells. It has a lot of benefits for multiple reasons. A, it takes PVA glue, because PVA glue is basically a wood glue anyway, and walnut shells are basically wood. So the PVA glue sticks really, really well to it. It takes paint really well, and it's a fine enough granularity that it doesn't look like my models are walking on boulders. That's some of the problems, like the stuff if you look on the left. Some people put that on their bases, which I guess is fine, but it always seems odd to me when I see, like, when you look at the scale of your models, when some of those rocks are as big as their chest, they wouldn't be just, you know, chilling out and hanging out there. They would be, that would be something they'd be traversing. So for me, what I end up doing, I do a little bit of PVA glue. And again, I just put this in a Chinese food container that I put this in, and that's all the crushed walnut shells are in. Put some of that PVA glue down, a little bit of water mix, just dip your model on there. Let it sit for a minute or two, and then pull it back out and dust off all the excess. And then I'll take some of those bigger rocks, like maybe if I want to put one or two. There's actually an interesting mix in there of like this crushed shale that's in there. So it looks like crackling rock that I can put on top of there. That kind of fun stuff to actually add to the bottom of your base. And again, this is a free a free basing material. I think the bag of reptile litter I got may cost me $4 at a pet supply store. But again, the rocks in your driveway, at the end of your driveway, that's free. Everybody can get that. The Tupperware container is all it's got. So that's going to get you to the point where now you have your model based. Your model's been assembled. It's based. Your mold lines are all shaved off. A couple other tools that may or may not come in handy. Not everyone's going to require this, but I have files. I think I went to the dollar store and found that I have a whole set of these. Different size files. Some of them are flat. Some of them are rounded. These come in handy in a lot of different reasons. Metal models, if you're still playing with metal models, using an X-Acto knife to shave down the mold lines off of a metal model might not quite do the job. You might actually have to get down to filing it, especially if you've clipped the sprue a little bit too close and there's a hunk of metal on there. You don't want to sit there with a knife with the pewter or whatever, the tin that they make that out of, and try to like carve your thumb up as you're trying to shave those off. So sometimes I just file those. I also use a lot of filing whenever I'm doing my own kit bashes and my own mods. I make a lot of my own bits. For example, if I wanted my one Marine to have a melt-a-gun, and I got a melt-a-gun bit, but I didn't have the hand, so sometimes you need to get a little in there and filing and to get a hand on there to be able to get them to work. That's where I find the files useful. Those are basically optional. You don't need those necessarily. The other things I can recommend, the last things is blue tack. This is a material that is mostly used for putting posters up on, and you'll see this a lot in office supplies. You can tell I've got like a big wad of it because I just got done painting a whole bunch of my models and putting all the stuff back together. You're going to find instances where you're going to want to stick something to something in a temporary basis, and blue tack is actually a really good material to be able to do that for a temporary purpose. Mostly what I use blue tack for is when I paint my models and I'm doing base coats. I always take a little piece of cardboard. As you can tell, this is how I did this. This is actually still some blue tack stuck here. I stick my models down here on blue tack, so whenever I'm painting them, I can get them upside down when I'm doing my my priming for my models. So a little strip of cardboard just to stick them down onto, and some blue tack. Stick the models, the bases down on them, and that'll get them down on there. So that's it for the most part. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other small one-time use kind of hobby tools that you can come up with, but that's the basics. Those are the basic things you're going to want to need in your hobby toolbox to be able to put your models together. Now, the one thing I did not cover, of course, were paintbrushes and paints. That's a complex subject that I feel I'm going to save for the next video. We'll cover those on there because that's a little bit more. We need to get a little bit more into detail into those as far as what you need. So those are your basic tools that you're going to need for your hobbies. The next video we're going to cover paints and paintbrushes. So check that one out. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below. If I missed any hobby tools that you feel that I should include in that list, is there anything you feel that should have been on this list for hobby tools that I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. If I've earned it and you enjoyed the content, hit the like and subscribe button as well. That'd be super helpful to the channel. So until next time, guys, we shall see you on the battlefield.
This video was brought to you in no small part by our patrons. If you would like to help out the channel, go to www.patreon.com/oldguygamingmtga, and thank you for your support.